Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Battle video. In this video we are going to be taking a look at the epic collection of battles, and we're going to be taking a look at the new stage that was added in, and we're going to be completing the target Goku category. Now, full disclaimer, you can complete all the missions in one go by using a cell-centric Android cell socket team. So it is possible to complete all three sets of missions for this stage with a cell-centric team. And the reason I'm not doing so is just for a bit of variety. Firstly, to show some different team builds if people are interested, and secondly, of course, just to diversify things for myself, because it's a bit boring to use a full cell team like everyone else and complete everything at once. At least that's my perspective on it. So Epic Collection of Battles is pretty interesting because it's a little bit different to Red Zone, it's a little bit different to the God events, it's a little bit different to a lot of events in that it's kind of like SBR, where you're fighting multiple different stages of enemies, but in this mode they're a little bit harder, or they have a little bit more gimmicks, so to say. So like with Trunks there, although you didn't get to see because he's not too challenging, Trunks was immune to stunning and sealing, and the event kind of ramps itself up. You also get the really cool part where you get to kind of choose between two different enemies to face. So on the one side you have Vegeta, who will turn into Trunks, and on the other side you have Piccolo, who will change into Tien. And this is cool because this means that between the runs you can have a little bit of like variation, which I think is good. It also means you can build somewhat different teams to tackle each side of the challenge. So Trunks, obviously very straightforward, immune to stunning and sealing. We've chosen the side with Vegeta and Trunks. This side, Vegeta's immune to sealing. He also can lower your defense. And the Trunks that appears afterwards is immune to stunning. So that's them. If we had chosen the Piccolo side, a little bit different. Piccolo's immune to stunning, but he can heal. And Tien is immune to sealing, and he can stun you. So a little bit different, and that's what makes the event so interesting. We'll talk about each boss obviously as we kind of come up to them, but I wanted to talk about the level of difficulty a little bit. So in terms of the epic collection of battles, I think Gohan at the end, if I'm not mistaken, hits for around 800-900,000. That's what it feels like to me. Can't really state that is the exact case. I haven't looked at the data behind them, but I think that is where he lies on the spectrum. So I think the final stage of Gohan hits for around 900k, which is a decent amount. It's not a small amount. It's definitely quite a challenge. I think that puts it in perspective to being a little bit harder than LGEGT. So it's kind of similar in that nature, that it's a little bit harder than the LGEGT. So yeah, that's obviously going to be something that you're going to have to be aware of. With that being said, you can run some pretty strong team builds for all of the reciprocating challenges, and obviously teams that are red zone ready shouldn't have a huge issue with any of these events. You can also take two sets of items. What I like to take in terms of items is generally some kind of damage reduction one, like an Icarus, and then I like to kind of take a healing item of some kind. You can also use support memories, of course, and so there's a lot that you can use. And what's interesting is they kind of keep, obviously beyond the last boss, because the last boss of all of these events has to be immune to stunning and immune to sealing, all the standard affairs. But what's interesting is that they, to a certain extent, they do have quite an interesting kind of build for a lot of these guys. A lot of these units can be stunned or can be sealed or have healing, or there's a couple of things that you can actually do to kind of combat them to make your time up to the final boss easier, which in turn obviously means you have items to play with and makes the final boss a lot more manageable. So in terms of my team build for the Target Goku category, Obviously, Target Goku is a bit of a strange category. I think as a category, it needs a couple leads, it needs a couple changes. In terms of my team build, I kind of went with a more movie bosses centric team build. Obviously with Broly as my lead for various reasons, but one, considering that it's based on the Android Cell Saga, I knew that we'd be facing a lot of hybrid Saiyans and pure Saiyans. If you don't have Broly, you can use Turles, and that should be fine, because Turles is also fantastic against super enemies, so he'll be good in this stage. One thing I will mention that's very important before we kind of get to the final build of the team, the thing I will mention that's super important is that the final boss massively reduces damage done to them by units of the same type, class. So for example, if you bring a super team into this stage, Gohan at the end will reduce the damage quite severely. So that's kind of important to note, because it's going to be really important for like the Android Cell Saga based challenges, because you can't just run Cells in the extreme version, you can't just run Gohans in the super version. I mean, you can, but they won't do any damage, or basically won't do any damage. So that's just something to preface before kind of talking about the final team build. So yeah, so as I mentioned before, my lead is obviously Broly. I've also refrained from putting any distinctive LRs in my team. A couple of reasons why. I think it just makes for more interesting kind of team building when you don't put the same standard LRs in your team, especially since the event's not red zone level difficulty. It's kind of a little bit just below that. So, for me, obviously not to say that it's easy, but I think it's more interesting to somewhat limit the team build beyond that. So for a lot of these challenges, I won't be placing LRs in my team unless they're free to play or easily accessible. So obviously we have Broly. Broly, as I mentioned, I brought him for the main reason being he's obviously the lead I'm kind of rolling with, which is pretty important. But also, his leader skill covers a lot of the best options for me in terms of target Goku. You can replace him with Turles, is also fine, but distinctly I chose Broly because I knew we'd be facing a pure Saiyan and a hybrid Saiyan, or a hybrid Saiyan for the last kind of section of the hardest section of the stage, and Broly's great against hybrid Saiyans and pure Saiyans. So really wanted to use Broly. I think he was really solid, and yeah, I think he was a great choice. Then in terms of obviously the rest of the team, so you'll notice that I went with AGL Golden Frieza and Tech Golden Frieza. Very simple reasoning behind this. Both of them are exceptional tanking units. So AGL Golden Frieza, the non-LR version, 90% damage reduction just as long as you're above 40% health. This is very good. And Tech Frieza has 80% damage reduction as long as we are above 50% health. And he still has 50% when you're below 50% as well, so he's also a fairly solid option in that respect. The friend lead, of course, was always going to be the LR Cooler. I think people who maybe don't have a Cooler don't realize how good Cooler is, but basically as long as Cooler can get through the first couple turns to have his defense raise, he's basically, at least still for me, probably one of the top 3 offensive units in the game. And yeah, he's pretty strong defensively after his supers as well. So Cooler is crazy, really good. And yeah, honestly speaking, I think he's just good. He's just really good. So yeah, Cooler really helped us out a lot, and he's a heavy source of damage. Obviously, him being the friend lead means I'm sticking to my rules of not using him, and you should be able to use him pretty well. With his movie bosses coverage, his Terrifying Conquerors coverage, you should be able to use him as the friend lead pretty unconditionally for this kind of team build. Even if you're using an Android 13, you should be able to coverage enough units between it. But if not, then obviously you can't take him I would honestly suggest just building around Wicked Bloodlines and Cooler more so than any other category due to their general strength. Speaking of Wicked Bloodlines and Cooler, we're using the Easy 8 Strength Cooler. Mine's only at 55%, which means he's still pretty insane. But yes, obviously a very strong unit. If you don't have him, you can as well replace him with pretty much any of these solid movie bosses kind of revamped units that have come out. I think Turles will be fine, or you can use the Tech Cooler. He's a free-to-play unit. He's not as good, obviously not as good, but he's solid enough, and he does provide key and support to the LR Cooler, so it's a decent trade-off. It's not perfect, but it'll work. And then you have AGL Metal Cooler. AGL Metal Cooler, also Easy Aid, very strong unit. His Metal Core Cooler form, very helpful as well. But yeah, he's in general just a pretty solid option, like a very strong narratively option. And he obviously has additional crit chance when facing Pure Sands, which is helpful, but he also has additional crit chance when facing superclass enemies. So he does decent damage the whole way through, and in general he's a very, very solid option for us. Like he's good. His healing's also very nice, especially with the Int LR Cooler that's obviously around. So we have Int LR Cooler, the free-to-play one. Remember I said no LRs except for free-to-play ones, so he does count and he's fine. But we have the Int LR Cooler, and the Int LR Cooler is distinctly a pretty strong option as well. You know, he is very, very good. Does a lot of stuff. A lot of people didn't like him. I think he's just a more than fine option, really. Actually, I don't see him being a huge issue as a unit. Honestly, I think people kind of complained a bit too much about him. I think he's great as a floater, second slot unit. That 8% HP recovery does come in handy. His defense after supers is enough, especially for this event. And yeah, I think in general he does really, really well. And I was really happy with his overall performance. I think he did a decent job. I think he gave the team what they needed. Didn't, completely dominate the event or anything like that. I'm no fool. That was the job of good old strength LR Cooler, but yeah, I think in general he was really, really good. Obviously, this is just my choices. The thing is, you don't have to follow these choices at all. So there's plenty of great options. Like I said, if you want to complete all the missions at one time, then going for a cell-centric team is going to be the best bet for you. A cell Android soccer team is going to be your best bet. You're going to have a lot of really, really strong units. And yeah, there's plenty of great cell options, especially the Easy 8 Int cell. You have the AGL transforming cell. You have the tech, androids that you can use. You've got the Int Android 20 and Android 19. You've got tons of great options. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there's distinctly a good or a bad way to take on this event. You can take them on however you want. It's just honestly depending on what units you have in your box. I think Broly's are probably out the question. Although they're great damage, I don't think they're good for this event. Like I said, Int Gohan can hit relatively hard, and the only reason that Int Broly does well is because of those different layers of damage reduction that he gains against Pure Sands and Hybrid Sands. Plus his active skill is really, really helpful. I think beyond that, I wouldn't really propose using any of the Brolys. I do think Wicked Bloodlines is still by extension the best option for you to take, just because you've got a good bunch of free-to-play options there in form of the free-to-play Metal Cooler units that you can use, which I think is really, really solid overall. They will get caught out in the final couple stages. A lot of them will need to rely on their evasion or the similar mechanics like that for them to really kind of function at their full capabilities. But yeah, you can use a couple of them for sure. I wouldn't use a full free-to-play Metal Cooler team, not that it's not possible. Especially if you have the LR Metal Cooler, you should be able to. but I don't really feel like it's going to be an easy time. There will be some required RNG. Like I said, Gohan hits pretty hard, and he hits probably too hard even for the Metal Cooler team at their full capabilities in terms of performance. With that being said, obviously, you know, if you can use LR Final Form Cooler, use LR Final Form Cooler, because yeah, as you can see, he's about to end this whole situation with relative ease. Huge damage, huge everything. Just a big boy. He's just a big boy. But yeah, it was a lot of, I want to say it was a lot of fun. I do like the Epic Collection battles. I think they're an interesting concept, and I do think it's a good level of content. I think it's fun. I think it's good. I think it's like interesting, at least for me. And yeah, I think honestly, it's a very, very good, event. That's a lot of fun. It changes things up. I do wish they'd bring them out a bit more often, but it's good and I enjoy it. And I think at the end of the day, it's something that's a lot of fun and a lot of players can enjoy. But yeah, that is the target Goku mission done. So fairly straightforward. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. We'll be completing all the other challenges as well. And then I might do a video about completing all of them in one go, or completing it no item or something. I don't know yet. We'll just see how it goes. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. See you guys next time. Till then, bye.